Before history remembers the heroes, it remembers the silence before the storm. By 1944, the world was exhausted. 5 years of global war had drained continents of youth, hope, and illusion. Cities once vibrant with life were reduced to skeletal ruins. Entire generations were buried beneath foreign soil. And yet, despite the devastation, Adolf Hitler's regime still held a firm grip over most of Western Europe. France had fallen in 1940 with shocking speed. The Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, all under occupation. The English Channel had become more than water. It was the dividing line between oppression and the last stronghold of resistance in the West. But the war was shifting. In the East, the Soviet Union had begun pushing German forces backward after the catastrophic failure at Stalingrad. The Wehrmacht was bleeding. Supplies were strained. The illusion of invincibility had cracked. Still, Germany remained powerful, and Hitler believed one thing with absolute certainty. The Allies would eventually invade Western Europe. The only question was where. Across the Channel, Britain had transformed into a fortress of preparation. American troops flooded into ports, airfields, and rural training camps. The United States had fully committed its industrial might to the war effort. Ships were being built faster than they could be counted. Aircraft rolled off assembly lines daily. But this invasion would be unlike anything in military history. Not a raid. Not a limited assault. An armada. The strategic objective was brutally simple. Establish a foothold in Nazi-occupied France. Break through. Liberate Europe. But simplicity in objective does not mean simplicity in execution. To invade France meant attacking a coastline heavily fortified under Hitler's orders, the Atlantic Wall. Concrete bunkers reinforced with steel. Artillery pieces capable of striking miles into the sea. Machine gun nests carved into cliffs. Mines buried beneath sand. Underwater obstacles designed to rip open landing craft. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had personally inspected many of these defenses. He believed the invasion would be decided in the first 24 hours. If the Allies gained ground, Germany would struggle to push them back due to Allied air superiority. He was right. But internal German command politics created fatal delays. Panzer divisions were not fully under Rommel's authority. Hitler retained personal control over key armored units, believing only he could decide their deployment. Centralized power would become strategic paralysis. Meanwhile, in London, Washington, and Allied command centers, the weight of the decision pressed heavily. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower was not chosen merely for tactical brilliance. He was chosen because he could unify egos. British commanders, American generals, Canadian divisions, Free French forces, naval leadership, Air Force strategists. Each had opinions, each had pride, each represented a nation. Unity would be the greatest weapon. The planning operation was codenamed Operation Overlord. Every detail mattered. Tides had to be low enough to expose beach obstacles. The moon had to be bright enough for airborne operations. Weather had to allow naval precision but still conceal movement. A narrow window existed in early June 1944. But even before a single soldier stepped onto French sand, the battle of deception had begun. Operation Fortitude. one of the most successful military deceptions in history. Fake radio transmissions created phantom divisions. Inflatable tanks and wooden aircraft were placed in southeastern England. Double agents fed German intelligence false information suggesting the main invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais, the shortest crossing from England. German high command believed it. Even Rommel believed Normandy was unlikely. This deception would buy the Allies priceless time. But deception alone would not carry men across machine gun fire. The human element was something no strategist could fully calculate. In camps across England, young men wrote letters. Some joked. Some reassured. Some confessed fears they had never spoken aloud. Many sealed envelopes that would only be opened if they did not return. The psychological burden was immense. They had trained for months rehearsing landings on replica beaches, practicing coordination between infantry and naval gunfire, simulating chaos. But simulation cannot replicate the sound of real bullets, or the smell of burning steel, or the weight of watching a friend fall beside you. And yet they boarded ships. Over 156,000 soldiers would participate on the first day alone, the largest amphibious invasion in history. On June 5th, 1944, the weather turned violent. Storms churned the channel. Waves battered landing craft. Cloud cover threatened airborne drops. Some commanders advised delay. Meteorologist James Stagg predicted a brief improvement. A small window. Risky, but possible. Eisenhower listened quietly as opinions clashed. Delay meant losing surprise. Delay meant reassembling thousands of ships. Delay meant more German reinforcement. Finally, Eisenhower spoke. We go. 4 words, carrying the fate of Europe. That night, the channel filled with shadows. Ships stretched beyond the horizon. Engines hummed under blackout conditions. Above them, aircraft engines roared into darkness. Paratroopers sat in silence inside transport planes. Each man carried over 30 kilograms of equipment. Rifle, ammunition, explosives, rations, radio gear. Some men vomited from nerves. Some prayed. Some stared into nothing. When the green light flashed, they stepped into black sky. Anti-aircraft fire exploded around them. Red tracers cut through clouds. Planes veered off course. Many paratroopers landed miles from their objectives. Some drowned in flooded fields deliberately created by German engineers. Some were captured within minutes. But many adapted. Small groups formed spontaneously. Officers reorganized scattered men. Bridges were seized. Roadways sabotaged. German communications disrupted. Chaos became opportunity. As dawn approached, the sea revealed its scale. More than 5,000 vessels. Battleships opened fire. The bombardment shook Normandy's coastline. Concrete bunkers trembled. Smoke rolled inland. Then came the landing craft. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. Each beach carried its own fate. At Utah, currents pushed American forces off target, ironically, into weaker defenses. Progress was faster than expected. At Omaha, everything went wrong. German defenses remained largely intact. Elevated bluffs provided devastating vantage points. As landing ramps dropped, machine gun fire tore through the first waves. Men fell before reaching sand. Equipment dragged soldiers underwater. Officers were killed instantly, leaving units disoriented. For a brief, horrifying period, it appeared the invasion might fail. But individuals made decisions that changed history. Small groups crawled up cliffs under fire. Naval destroyers moved dangerously close to shore to provide direct artillery support. Engineers cleared obstacles manually while bullets struck around them. By mid-afternoon, fragmented footholds merged. Omaha held. On the British and Canadian beaches, fierce resistance met disciplined advance. Towns became battle zones within hours. By nightfall, the Allies had established a precarious but undeniable presence in France. The Atlantic Wall had been breached, and Hitler did not immediately believe it. He was asleep when news arrived. Senior officers hesitated to wake him. Panzer divisions waited for authorization. Hours passed. Those hours changed everything. Because invasion is not won in the first wave. It is won in reinforcement. Artificial harbors, mulberries, were constructed offshore. Supplies poured in. Vehicles rolled onto French soil. Fuel pipelines were laid beneath the channel. The foothold expanded. But Normandy was not open terrain. It was bocage country. Dense hedgerows dividing fields into natural fortresses. Every advance became close-quarters combat. Snipers hidden in foliage. Tanks trapped in narrow lanes. Progress measured in meters. Weeks of brutal fighting followed. Yet momentum had shifted. D-Day was not the end. It was the irreversible beginning of the end. The sand of the beaches had barely settled when a new reality began to reveal itself. The invasion had succeeded, but survival was only the first step. Now came the part no one could rehearse. Normandy was not the open battlefield many Allied planners had imagined. It was not wide plains ideal for armored breakthroughs. It was a maze, a living labyrinth of earth and hedge. The countryside was divided by ancient embankments, some rising over 2 meters high, topped with thick, intertwined hedgerows, roots as dense as barbed wire, soil hardened by centuries. Narrow, sunken lanes carved by wagon wheels over generations. This was the bocage. To an advancing army, it was a nightmare. Every field was a fortress. Every hedge concealed danger. A single German machine gun team hidden behind foliage could halt an entire company. Snipers moved silently between natural walls. Mortar teams adjusted fire from unseen positions. Tanks found themselves unable to see beyond a few meters without exposing vulnerable underbellies while climbing embankments. Progress slowed to a crawl. This was no longer the dramatic spectacle of beach landings. It was intimate, close, personal. American infantry units advancing inland from Omaha and Utah found themselves engaged in small, brutal firefights that lasted hours for territory measured in yards. British and Canadian forces faced fierce counterattacks near Caen, a city that became a symbol of stubborn resistance. German forces were battered, but they were not broken. Despite heavy losses on D-Day, many experienced Wehrmacht units remained disciplined. SS Panzer divisions were redeployed toward Normandy. Though delayed, they arrived with determination. Hitler still believed that Normandy might not be the main invasion. He remained convinced that Pas-de-Calais was the true objective. So he held back reserves. That hesitation, that refusal to fully commit armored divisions, immediately became one of the defining strategic mistakes of the war. But, on the ground, for the individual soldier, grand strategy meant little. What mattered was the next hedge, the next corner, the next sound in the brush. American soldiers began modifying their tanks, welding steel prongs to the front to cut through hedgerows without exposing their vulnerable undersides. Innovation was born from necessity. In the skies above, Allied air superiority proved decisive. German reinforcements moving by day were relentlessly attacked by fighter bombers. Roads became death corridors for convoys caught in the open. But air power could not fully eliminate resistance hidden beneath foliage. The fighting became grinding, attritional, exhausting. Sleep was rare, food often cold, water sometimes scarce. The psychological toll deepened. Many soldiers later described Normandy not as one battle, but as a series of continuous ambushes. There were no clear front lines, no safe rear zones. Artillery could fall without warning. Mortars could whistle in mid-sentence. Some units suffered casualty rates exceeding 30% within weeks. And yet, slowly, relentlessly, the Allied front expanded. The city of Caen became a focal point for British and Canadian forces. Originally intended to fall on D-Day itself, it resisted far longer than expected. German armored divisions defended it fiercely, understanding its strategic importance as a road hub. The bombing of Caen reduced much of the city to rubble. Civilians were trapped beneath debris. Liberation came at a terrible cost. War does not choose carefully what it destroys. While British forces fixed German armor near Caen, American forces in the West prepared for a breakout. Operation Cobra. The objective: punch through German lines in the American sector and escape the bocage into open terrain, where mobility and armored superiority could finally dominate. Before Cobra began, Allied bombers conducted one of the most intense aerial bombardments of the campaign. Thousands of tons of explosives fell on a narrow stretch of German defenses. But war is never perfectly controlled. Some bombs fell short. Friendly fire casualties struck American troops. Confusion erupted. Yet the bombardment shattered German cohesion. When ground forces advanced, resistance was disorganized. The line broke. And once it broke, it did not reform easily. American armored divisions surged forward into Brittany and beyond. Speed returned to the battlefield. German units, already stretched thin, began retreating under pressure. The war shifted from static hedgerow combat to fluid maneuver warfare, but Hitler refused withdrawal. He ordered counterattacks. He demanded that ground be held at all costs. One such decision led to the formation of the Falaise Pocket. As Allied forces advanced from multiple directions, German armies risked encirclement near the town of Falaise. Canadian, British, Polish, and American forces tightened the gap. Inside the pocket, chaos unfolded. Columns of German vehicles jammed narrow roads. Artillery rained down. Aircraft attacked relentlessly. Soldiers attempted desperate escapes through shrinking corridors. Thousands were killed. Thousands captured. Though some escaped eastward, the destruction of German forces in Normandy was catastrophic. It marked the collapse of organized German resistance in France. Paris would soon be within reach. But even as liberation approached, exhaustion lingered. Soldiers had been fighting continuously for over 2 months since D-Day. The initial adrenaline had faded. What remained was fatigue layered with hardened resolve. On August 25th, 1944, Paris was liberated. Crowds flooded streets. Flags appeared from hidden drawers. Tears replaced silence. But liberation did not mean the war was over. Germany still controlled vast territory. The Siegfried Line awaited. And Hitler still believed in miracle weapons and destiny. Back in Normandy, the beaches were no longer battle zones. They had become arteries of supply. Artificial harbors handled thousands of tons of cargo daily. Vehicles streamed inland. Fuel pipelines under the channel pumped life into advancing armies. Logistics, often invisible in storytelling, proved as decisive as bravery. An army moves on fuel, ammunition, and food, and the Allies had mastered industrial warfare. Meanwhile, inside Germany, cracks deepened. The failed July 20th assassination attempt against Hitler had shaken the regime. Paranoia intensified. Executions followed. Trust eroded within command structures. But Hitler remained defiant. He believed that Allied momentum would eventually stall. He believed that political fractures between Western allies and the Soviet Union would emerge. He believed that endurance would outlast invasion. He underestimated the irreversible nature of D-Day. Because D-Day was not just a landing. It was proof. Proof that Fortress Europe could be breached. Proof that Allied coordination across nations could overcome ideology rooted in tyranny. Proof that industrial democracies could mobilize at scale. And perhaps most importantly, proof to occupied populations that liberation was not a myth. It was coming. Yet for the soldiers still advancing through France, Belgium, and toward Germany, the cost remained immediate. Friends buried beside roads. Names written in small notebooks. Letters never delivered. War rarely feels historic in the moment. It feels muddy, confusing, loud, exhausting. Only later does history draw clean lines. The beaches of Normandy would later become sacred ground. But in June, July, and August of 1944, they were chaos. And chaos, when directed with purpose, can reshape the world. The Allied foothold in Normandy had grown into a flood. Germany was now fighting a two-front war with shrinking resources. The Eastern Front pushed westward. The Western Front pushed eastward. The vice tightened. And it all began with a decision made under stormy skies. We go.